Boys, we're here for the first episode of Tracktion Compound. Kirby, Paulson, Mike Bachmann. I'm your host, Cullen Ronan. Dude, I'm excited for this, boys. We've been talking about it for a while, and it's coming into fruition. The debut episode. Good to be here, guys.
Yeah, it was one of those things where we kind of all had this conversation outside of each other's circles. And we found ourselves trying to talk NASCAR to people who don't understand it at all. So I think that's really where we all kind of took the idea of why don't we try to have some fun with this? And at least if we're going to have these conversations, we might as well let some people listen in and try to learn the sport a little better and help people understand why we love it so much. So I'm happy to be here, boys.
Yeah, Kurt. I mean, when you reached out to me on LinkedIn, because I've been searching for guys who watch NASCAR and that are NASCAR fans. When you said that, I was totally on board. So looking forward to it. Ready to talk some motorsports. It's going to be a good year, big year.
Getting into it, Kirby, you immediately got some fresh off the presses news for us that you're willing to drop. So the yellow flag's out, baby. We just got started, but we're going to slow it down here. Hit us with that breaking news.
Yeah, so not necessarily breaking, but definitely something to speculate on because this has been mentioned in the past, and I know that 2021 they're trying to implement a lot of big changes. But saw a tweet from Justin Fielder, who is a Cup Series tire changer, not exactly sure wherefore, but he posted this giant thread of like 10 tweets.
Oh, boy.
Stops. And I'll just read off a few. So his main one said, hashtag NASCAR pit stops a thread. Big change is coming for 2021. We all know it. We can't stop it. By all accounts, pit stops could be drastically different. We've heard everything from new fueling to single wheel nuts to air jacks to crew limits and more. And then he basically goes on saying that there's not much confirmed yet. It's all still kind of speculations. But what he did say is one of the most powerful tweets that I read. As we prepare to embark on the 2020 NASCAR Cup Series campaign, I urge you to really watch and enjoy the pit stops this season. The speed, the violence, the choreography, fuel cans that weigh nearly 100 pounds, tires that weigh 75, changers hitting 5 lug nuts in 1 second. The very best make it look so easy. So obviously there's a lot of speculation going around with the pit stops and coming from the tire changer himself. I mean, what do you guys make of this? Is it something that we should really take into consideration? Because there is a huge deal going around that we might be seeing some drastic changes to these pit stops come 2021.
Oh, man, that's so vague, though. I just, I don't know how drastic you can possibly get. For something that's worked as long as it has, I mean, now with the stage format, you look at it, it's kind of like, that's really what you're looking at when they come down pit road. So I don't know how drastic they can get. Cole?
I know, Bach, we talked about it before we started rolling here, but I think the writing has been on the wall for this for quite a while. I mean, look at Xfinity, look at trucks. They're implementing something similar. The stages, if we keep adding more, there's really no incentive if there's no green flag runs, then why do live pit stops even matter? So at this point, I hate it, to be honest. I love green flag runs. I think it adds strategy to the race, but it's one of those things where times are changing, NASCAR is changing, and if this is something that they've got their mindset on, I think it's too late for them to decide against it, and the writing's on the wall. So best enjoy it now. Whether this, the tire changer is legit or not, I guess we'll see, but it's scary to see stuff like that.
I think it is really important, though, to talk about how much in the last 2 or 3 years the sport has kind of won back over its base. I mean, you look at it, a few years ago, they were not doing great. And since then, it's kind of been a little bit of a resurgence. And whether that's, a little bit of personality coming up, you got some of these mid-tier elite guys, some of the older guys moving out. I think there is a bit of a resurgence here. So I think especially with these schedule changes coming in 2021, it could get real interesting. I don't know how it's all going to mesh at the same time, but I definitely think it's something to watch.
Absolutely. And I also think going off of that, we talk a lot about, like you said, Kurt, all these big name drivers that are leaving the sport. Junior, Gordon, Kenseth, all these guys. Johnson's moving out this year.
Ugh.
Yeah. So it's time for these young guns to step up. You look at guys like Ryan Blaney, Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman, Byron.
But guys, who are the young guns, though? Who are the young guns anymore? Some of these guys have been around for a few years now. How long can you call them young guys?
I I think where it's different than when we had like the Gillette Young Guns, which were Junior, Kenseth, all those guys you named earlier. The sport just keeps getting younger. So we think in our head we don't have these young guys. Byron's only 22 years old. Like, these guys are young for 8 more years.
They're not still so high on Byron, especially going into the season. I mean, Cullen, you and I talk about this every 15 minutes, I feel like. But that kid was underrated last year, still somehow underperformed, and is set for a big year this year. I'm really excited about the entire Hendrick lineup because I think it's going to be a lot of fun towards the end of the stretch here.
I think, Bach, you can probably speak to this being a Jimmy Johnson guy yourself, but Chad Knaus absolutely turned that program around. Although we saw Chase Elliott have some problems in the 24 when he was gifted it, but he didn't have Chad Knaus. So it was just a matter of time before that team really picked it up, and he was really the spark that veteran presence that allowed the young guy, Byron, to really step into his role at HMS and produce more than he did in his rookie year. He had a pretty solid campaign last year, making the playoffs. I think this year really is going to be his breakout campaign.
Absolutely. And, going off of that, I mean, Chad Knaus, whether you like it or not, is the best crew chief in the garage. He still is. I mean, 7 championships with Jimmy Johnson, those 83 wins. I mean, those are just stats that you can't compare right now. And the fact that Johnson is still in that Hendrick camp, still able to possibly relay information to Byron, and also just that connection that he has deeply with Hendrick Motorsports, I think is going to benefit Byron greatly. I mean, last year we saw he leaps and bounds over his rookie season, made the playoffs, and I absolutely believe that he's going to break through for his first win. And possibly, I wouldn't be surprised if he wins multiple this year. He's been close many times. I believe he had, 5 poles last year, so he's got speed. And just Hendrick as a whole, I expect Byron, I expect Bowman, and I expect Jimmy back in victory lane this year.
Oh, it's got to happen, right? It's got to happen. I mean,
talk about back against the wall. Guys like Bowman, he's in a contract year. He had 1 win last year, but he really needs to produce. That whole HMS lineup, they all have something at stake this season. I guess maybe Chase Elliott less so than the rest of them, but those 3 guys.
What makes you say that?
JJ. I mean, most popular driver, got 3 wins last year. He's consistent week to week. You could argue that maybe he should be producing more, but 3 wins, granted 2 are road courses, that's still a pretty respectable year.
Yeah, I mean, there can be some serious seats up next year at HMS. I mean, depending on how everything plays out, Jimmy is for sure retiring unless he kind of pulls back, and secretly I hope that he does, but realistically, that's one seat that's already starting a discussion. And then you got the boys there. And in terms of Bowman, I mean, Bowman is on the hot seat and he's going to have to perform. But I do think that he has his moments when it comes to being as talented as he is. And he's still coming close to clipping poles every single year. So I don't really know if placement ends up mattering that much anymore at the bigger super speedways. But in the long run, he's going to have to perform at some of those short tracks and really, really cement himself with Hendricks.
Absolutely. I mean, 3 straight runner-up finishes last year, and he got that breakthrough win. So as you said, definitely performing on those 1.5 miles, those short tracks is going to be imperative for these guys, because the silly season next year is going to be wild. I mean,
I can't wait.
And we're definitely going to touch on that later in the episode. But before we move on to kind of dissecting the Clash a little bit, Bowman does have some struggles with sponsorship. Just announced today that he lost Exalta as well. So, I mean, he's definitely going to have to earn some cash to keep that ride, regardless of how he performs.
Yeah, he lost Exalta. Byron got it as the extension with Exalta through 2027. So, obviously, they're invested in him. They see, the promise that he brings. And, obviously, we didn't know what Bowman's sponsorship was going to be until a couple weeks ago. And even so, it's a lot of internal help from Rick Hendrick and the Chevy camp. So we have to see how it all plays out, because if you don't have the sponsorship, then it's going to be a lot more tougher for you to get a good ride in the Cup Series.
Sponsorship is the name of the game, and it goes all the way from the lowest tier drivers all the way even up to the sanctioning body itself. And just touching on sponsorship and kind of moving the conversation in a different direction, I think something that NASCAR has done really well is kind of remake this sponsorship model and look at how they wanted to look at the Premier Series and mix things up. So I'm very interested to see how something like that could inspire a team to maybe look at maybe less of those primary guys and start mixing it up a little bit. It's difficult because so many internal discussions happen all the time with stuff like that, and things are changing. It's like the tide, it ebbs and flows. But realistically, I'm very interested to see in the next 5 years what that's going to end up looking like, because I do think there's going to be a domino effect.
I mean, Roger Penske is always ahead of the curve. It seems like he's been rolling with this multiple sponsor, get as many as possible for years now. And you see it with Penske. I feel like every other race they have a new sponsor on one of those 3 cars. But even now, Brad Keselowski, the Miller Lite driver, he drives the number 2. They are only sponsoring 1 race this year. So I think that speaks volumes to just how that team has worked that sponsorship model so well. I know we've seen the Cup losing its main title sponsor, but if that means we can have events like the Busch Clash and have a fun sponsor for an event like that, I'm okay with how that works.
It's a world of opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if these rides have to get 8 or 9 different title sponsors throughout the year, as long as that car is on the track, I can't complain about it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you.
So moving on to the Clash itself, we're talking about a resurgence in popularity. The Clash had a 7% increase in views, which was huge. Obviously, we're going to talk about the race. That's definitely up for debate, whether it was a good one or not. An absolute wreck fest. The first 65 laps or so were boring, to say the least. We definitely got a long train of cars, but eventually those caution flags came out. We got some exciting restarts, and eventually Eric Jones got the win in his real beat up Toyota Camry.
I still don't know how that happened.
Yeah. So, boys, what were your thoughts on the race?
I mean, for me, and I was looking at social media a lot, trying to see what the fans were saying, and I kind of saw a 50-50 split. And honestly, that's kind of how I viewed the race itself. Obviously, in the beginning, like you said, we got those long trains that we're used to seeing now at these super speedways, guys getting used to the track and how it's going. But then, once it went off, it went off. And, I was counting down, seeing how many drivers were going to be running. There were 6 drivers left running when all was said and done. And, I mean, whether you like the race or not, seeing Eric Jones win in that beat-up car, just torn to shreds, I mean, you got to give props to the team for continuing to work on it for just this exhibition race. I mean, hell, these guys – no points involved. They could have just stopped and just could have went home. But these guys worked on the car, and I thought it was awesome seeing that at the end of the race.
Hey, great editing by Fox right in the middle of everything. You get the Chevys taking that bottom groove and staying a little behind, and Chevy just Fox just happens to edit in a part about, does anyone know what they're doing there? No one had a clue. Basically, they edited in what we were all thinking. I thought it was really entertaining. Some of the big ones kind of were frustrating because there was just no way to figure out what the outlook looked like. But I think that sometimes when you're at one of the big super speedways, that's bound to happen. It's kind of like taking your NASCAR fantasy picks at some of those bigger tracks. Nothing's really a safe bet because the one big one can usually screw you pretty bad. So, it was entertaining. I think it was a nice way to open up speed weeks beyond qualifying. And I'm really just trying to turn my attention to Sunday and get things going here.
So we saw the cars drop back, the Chevys specifically, to avoid the wrecks. They stayed in the back of the field. They ran together. Do we see that on Sunday for the 500? Or do you think maybe they just pulled this out just because it was the 75 lapper? It was an exhibition race. They were just trying to avoid the big one to get the dub. Or is this something that they were trying to practice for this weekend to actually use?
I mean, if they don't use it this weekend, they could use it another weekend. That's the way I look at it. I mean, this was a really good opportunity to get everybody else back on the track, kind of get on the same page here, and really get all the manufactured guys on the same page. And I think it was an interesting strategy, and I don't know that it works all the time. That's just the reality of it. It's not always the guys that are in the front of these big super speedways that are wrecking first. Sometimes that comes in the middle of the pack. I think that in life in general, it's really, really, really difficult to contingency plan for everything. Sometimes you just got to take a chance and get out there. So, it was interesting. It'd be a gamble if they tried it, I think, on Sunday, because I think just about anything can happen. But we'll see. You never know. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, anything can happen. I do think that the manufacturers will continue to be working together. Chevy's got this brand new Camaro ZL1, 1LE, such a mouthful. But, I mean, the Hendrick engines are super fast. I think they're going to work together, and I think you'll see a lot of that. I personally think you'll see a lot of that tandem, driving in the trains with the manufacturers. And come 50 laps to go, once you start getting more into the end, then it's all holds barred. Everybody's going to be going. But the one thing we're going to be looking at, I think, are guys throwing the blocks. That's been a big topic of conversation. Brad Keselowski's been extremely vocal about it, called out Logano this past weekend, basically saying he got wrecked by his teammate. And, I mean, I got to side with Keselowski on this one because there's two sides to it. I mean, as a driver, you don't want these drivers making these dumb mistakes where you're, pulling these bad blocks. But at the end of the day, you are trying to hold your position. You do have the lead, and, your spotter's got to do a good enough job to make sure that you have enough leeway and that those second, third place cars in the back aren't coming up super quick that they could just take you out like that. Because these cars now, as we saw at the Clash, are super all over the place and just trying to find that.
That's important, though. It's the clash. It's the clash. And let's say it once more for the people in the back. It's the clash. So I think everyone needs to take a step back and just hold on to that opinion for a little bit. Let the season start to play out. I get that people are getting frustrated when it comes to, mid-July, early August, and people are blocking left and right, or there's a whole lot of stuff going on down on the second turn of Pocono with block, whatever. That's fine. It's the clash. The season hasn't officially started yet. It doesn't go for standings points. Let's all relax on the blocking.
Yeah, so we just talked about Keselowski, Logano, but it's not all bad in the Ford camp right now. They just announced Kevin Harvick back to Stewart-Haas Racing through 2023. That's his age 47 season. Is this a risky move for Stewart-Haas, or is it worthwhile for them to stick with a veteran presence, someone who's proven to win, someone who's winning into his mid-40s, and someone who can bring sponsorship dollars?
Yes, absolutely. If there's anybody that SHR wanted to bring back, it's Harvick. I mean, Harvick still, as you said, is one of the top veteran drivers in the Cup Series. He's only missed the championship once since this format was started, and he won the championship in 2014 in its inaugural year. Harvick is still a shot to win 3 races every year, and until we see that decline, which we haven't, lock him up, because he is the only driver really producing at SHR. He was the only driver from SHR to make the playoffs last year. And when you look at guys like Clint Boyer, who's only made the playoffs once in his 3 years with Stewart-Haas, and even Almirola, who underperformed last year, along with Suarez, who was kicked out, Harvick is their guy, and he's been their guy since the start, since he was brought on to Stewart-Haas. And I hope to continue to see him being productive. And until he shows signs of starting to deplete a little bit in his performance, I mean, it was a no-brainer to bring Harvick back.
Yeah, and I got to jump right off of that opinion. You basically, if you gave me a scenario where I had to start a team tomorrow and I could pick any driver, it'd probably be Kevin Harvick. I mean, realistically, the guy's probably going to be in the Hall of Fame someday. He goes out there and competes every single race. He might not win every single one, but you see just how hard he works. And I think he's really found a groove with SHR. There's that kind of really good relationship between Tony and all the guys in there. I just think he has a really good thing going. So for SHR, great. I mean, lock him in. He's shown that he can drive results. And if he's going to be the premier guy in that group, then that's the guy you want leading you out there. When that younger talent starts to move in a lot more, I think he's also going to be much more of a leading force to go there. He's an entertaining guy, maybe not so much the Jeff Gordon, he's going to hit the media type, but I can see him in leadership. He just wants to go out, compete, win, and do what's best for his team. And I think that's really important. Really excited to see how the season goes, but there's one guy that's definitely not on a hot seat, along with, 15 others, but realistically, he deserves everything he's been given so far and more.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. He's clearly the face of that organization, and the only downfall to this deal is his age, but we've seen guys like Mark Martin produce well into their late 40s. Granted, it's a rarity, but it can happen. And I think the safety you get with having Kevin Harvick leading your squad out there, I'm not passing up on an opportunity to bring him back. But it's just interesting to see that first domino really of the 2021 or even into the future silly seasons fall with Kevin Harvick, because you know where he's going to be. And kind of along those lines, obviously, Jimmy Johnson's retiring, and the talk of the news until we find out who takes his 48 is going to be who is that domino to fall. But today he was at Circuit of the Americas at IndyCar testing. So, do we see a career with Jimmy Johnson outside of NASCAR when he's done? Or do you think maybe this was sort of just a publicity thing for him?
I mean, I don't want to think about that right now. I know in the past he's casually mentioned that he might want to dip his feet into IndyCar. And, I don't think that's out of any realm of possibility. But right now, I want to focus on him in his final season. All the IndyCar stuff, if he continues racing, great. But right now, I'm focused on Jimmy getting back to victory lane this year.
Colin, you asked the poor kid that question. That's like asking me what I think about what's going on with Tom Brady, which I'm also not going to talk about. Anyways, when you really look at it in the long run, though, boys, it's really simple. It's Jimmy Johnson is still a very marketable guy. He's still the face of this industry in many, many ways. And when you really, really look at it, he's worked really well with guys like Gatorade. I think things in the long run are going to continue to come up for him. Boston Marathon participant. People don't forget that. This guy is an absolute force. He's not going to stop anytime soon. At the very least, in my opinion, what I think I'm going to see from him is I think he's really going to get involved with the community a whole lot more. Now that he has more time off the track, you're going to see a lot more of this wellness stuff going on. Not saying that we're going to see like a kind of a TB12 comparison, but I wouldn't be surprised if he definitely got more into the wellness scene and tried to become more of an influencer for that area, because I definitely think that's something he seems interested in.
Yeah, I read a great story today on The Athletic about Jimmy Johnson and the efforts he makes to help the young guys in the sport. And one of those young guys is Corey LaJoie. And Bach, I know we talked about it in our group chat. He wrote a handwritten letter to Mr. Hendrick expressing his interest in that 48 car. Is that a realistic thing that could happen, or was this just a shot in the dark that this kid was taking?
I mean, look, a guy like Corey LaJoie, I mean, you take anything that you can possibly get. And I think a handwritten note to Rick Hendrick says a lot. I mean, Corey LaJoie has been in, subpar equipment. He's got the alliance with SHR, Go Fast Racing. I don't know how realistic of a possibility it's going to be when you look at guys like Kyle Larson, who's probably going to be, his name's probably going to be tied to that car the most out of all these drivers. I mean, if I'm looking in the future and predicting, I think maybe if Boyer steps out and does not return to SHR, that 14 car is open. LaJoie has the alliance with Go Fast. If he continues to produce in that equipment, got his first 2 top 10s last year, maybe there's a spot in SHR for him. But I don't know how realistic of a possibility it might be for him to go to Hendrick. I mean, maybe Rick sees this and really wants to take a chance. But I think right now it's too early to tell. And with other guys like Larson and a lot of other bigger names that have produced in their equipment, I don't know how much of a chance LaJoie would have.
I mean, I'll keep it simple. I don't see a fit there. Personally, I don't know. Maybe that's just me giving it the eye test or the gut test or whatever. That's just the way I look at it. And I also think that, kind of going off what Mike said, transitioning to better equipment doesn't really help everyone. I think that Casey Kane's a great guy and he had some talented moments, but look at the way he performed when he went over. So I just think it creates a bit of a challenge when we're setting up these expectations. I don't think it would be an immediate translation by any means.
Yeah, I just think it's fun to see, who else really is in the running for that. It's so far away where we can do nothing but speculate, but knowing a guy like that is willing to throw his hat in the ring, which he'd be stupid not to. But yeah, I think there are more apt candidates for it, but taking an open ride is, one of the most fun things to watch about NASCAR and keep up with. And sort of speaking about ride taking, we got Christopher Bell to the 95, we got Cole Custer to the 41, and we got Tyler Reddick to the 8. Those are 3 hot shot young prospects coming from the Xfinity Series. Out of those 3, who's going to have the best season?
Dude, I don't know. Flip a 3-faced coin. Honestly, this is a talented trio coming up. And really, I could see any of these 3 guys performing here. I personally love Cole Custer for no reason. I really don't have an overly strong attachment. I just like the kid. I think they're all going to perform really well, though, and I think they're putting themselves in really good positions. I mean, again, though, that 95, I'm going to miss DiBenedetto in that seat. I don't know why. I just like the idea of DiBenedetto in the number 95. Maybe that's just a weird curb thing.
I think Tyler Reddick has got this one on lock, and that's not just because he was the 2-time back-to-back Xfinity champ. I think he, out of the 3, granted it's limited, but he's the only one who has Cup experience. Cole Custer ran at the back of the field with Front Row in 2018, took a year off. The package has changed. It's a whole different animal. Christopher Bell, no starts in the Cup Series. Tyler Reddick started last year. He had 2 races, Daytona, Kansas, which he netted a top 10 in the RCR 31, which was just their 3rd car. That was the experimental car. That was just the extra one they threw out there. I think Tyler Reddick is poised for the best year out of all 3. And you can make an argument that, yeah, his equipment won't be as good as the 95, presumably with added help from Joe Gibbs, or the 41 where Cole Custer's driving a legitimate playoff contending car. But Tyler Reddick is the most experienced of the 3 with this Cup level. He's done the rounds before and these guys haven't. So I think he's really going to prove himself. Maybe he won't finish the highest in the points given the ride he's in, but he will have the most glimpses of potential stardom.
I think when you're that young, points don't matter. Development does. I think it's going to be really important to see how far he comes throughout the season. I don't know if statistics always play a role in seeing that. I just think there's a lot of confidence that can be gained in that situation.
Yeah, and I think this is exactly what RCR needs. Obviously, they have dropped off of the face of the earth ever since basically the beginning of the 2010s. I mean, Austin Dillon, outside of being Richard Childress's grandson, is not the guy. I mean, he's just not. Tyler Reddick is bringing in a whole nother level of youth. As you said, that Cup experience, I think, as well, is going to go a long way compared to guys like Custer and Bell. Doesn't matter how good they were in the Xfinity Series. It's a whole nother level when you get up there in Cup. And I think Reddick having that experience, I think he is poised probably for a good season and might be the best out of the 3. And I think, get if it's a playoff run, if he contends for wins, it doesn't even matter if he wins or not. I think it's exactly what Richard Childress needs to get them back on the map.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess this conversation can't really just be boxed into the young guys. We've had a lot of veteran movement as well. Kirby, I know it breaks your heart, but Matt DiBenedetto to that famed 21 of the Wood brothers.
I like the look. I like the look. It's a nice look.
Ricky Stenhouse to the 47, and even Daniel Suarez making, hopefully, full-time ride with Gaunt Brothers in the 96, reuniting him with Toyota. But, recycling the same question, out of those guys, that veteran movement, who do you see, progressing in their career and who might have tough years?
No, go Bach.
I mean, I think DiBenedetto has the most amount of growth. We've seen him perform above expectations in a lot of the equipment he's in. I mean, he led the most laps in the Daytona 500 last year. He's a good short track racer, always performs well at Bristol. I think he has a good shot of getting the Wood Brothers their 100th win. I mean, I don't know how much better the equipment is necessarily going from Levine family to Wood Brothers. Obviously, they have the alliance with Penske. Levine had the alliance with Joe Gibbs. Gibbs is the best team in that garage. But I think DiBenedetto is poised for an even better run that he's had. Stenhouse, obviously, making a great start on the pole for the 500. I don't see much happening with him there. And Suarez, I mean, he's in the Cup Series because his sponsors wanted to keep him in the Cup Series. This whole operation came together super last minute. I mean, I hope for the kid that he's able to run full time, but I mean, he might not make the 500 come Thursday during the duels. And I think that it's going to be a hard pill to swallow for somebody who, had opportunities in Gibbs and SHR, but has not performed. I mean, didn't make the playoffs, never won a race. So I think it'll be something that him and the team will have to figure out. And if they can make strides, possibly run top 20, I think it's a win for him.
I need a Matt D win this year. That's what I need. I will pass out. You will not hear from me in the group chat for about 2 hours of fainting over happiness. I don't know what it is about that guy. I just think he has a certain swagger to him. And I really do think that up against some seriously unbelievable talent, guys like, Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, those guys, he can stay up with the rest of them. I mean, I really think that this is the year that it's going to kind of hit that top edge there. I mean, just buy high on that guy all year. The buy-in and the compete is going to be so good from that team in general. I think they really are going to be able to believe in him a whole lot, and that matters in those closed door meetings and those long dog days of summer when you're trying to figure out what's going to work for the stretch here. So, buy high on Matt D. I think Suarez makes the 500. I think he's going to face another challenging year, though. It's been a nice story, but I think he's definitely hit that point where he's really going to start at least putting up some numbers. I think there's a couple other guys that are in that situation too. And you just got to be able to lock it down here and really dig in, because it's only going to get harder with the talent that we're seeing coming up through the ranks.
Yeah, and I really echo those thoughts as well. I think Matt DiBenedetto this year is going to be racing against those top guys, and he's had some experience, but being able to do it more often than he was able to at Go Fast or at Levine really is going to help him grow as a racer. And I think at the end of the year, we're going to look at him as a much improved driver, which is tough to say because it's clear he holds his own in this league. So, the future for him is certainly bright. As for Ricky Stenhouse, I think this car, the 37 last year, renumbered now the 47, but that car overachieved. And that car overachieved because Chris Buescher kept it on the track. And Ricky Stenhouse has trouble with that.
Ricky Stenhouse.
And certainly he's fast. He's got the speed. We saw it at Roush. We saw it with the Xfinity titles, but he can't keep it off the grass or the wall for that matter. So I think that's really going to hurt the team. And at the end of the year, they're going to be in a probably a worse spot than they are now. Obviously, it's great to get the pole at the 500. Anything like that for that team is a win. JTG Doherty will take as much as they can get, but I don't know if Ricky Stenhouse in the long term is really going to be that guy for them. And as far as Suarez, obviously, like you guys said earlier, tough breaks for him both times. Joe Gibbs, I think he was rushed after Carl Edwards' retirement. He didn't have time to really acclimate to Cup. It wasn't going to work out. The writing was on the wall immediately there. At SHR, I just don't think he had enough time to prove himself, and he's sort of a casualty of that. So this year, it's going to be an intriguing storyline. I don't think he's going to win races. He's not going to compete in the top 20, but it's going to be fun to watch those guys fight to get into these races. They don't have a charter. They got to do it the old-fashioned way. And regardless of if he's putting up good finishes or not, I'm definitely going to root for the guy. I want to see him in the top 40 each week, and hopefully earn a Cup ride in the future with a team that, has a charter.
We'll see. I don't know. He's starting at the top there of the 500. Dude, Bach texted in that group chat the other day about setting your qualifying prediction. And for whatever reason, I just happened to go with Stenhouse. And now I'm sitting with 5 extra bonus points, and we haven't even started the season yet. I'm going to pull the horseshoe out of my behind now. But I'm just saying, I don't know if that's going to last all season.
Yeah, and the weather is looking perfect for Sunday, boys. So we're not going to have any competition yellows, outside of the stages. But, are we going to see another wreck fest for the 500 like we saw for the Clash? Obviously, we talked about the Clash being the Clash. It's an exhibition race. There's not as much on the line. But the 500, you're still running at Daytona. You're still going to run into the same problems you had at the Clash. What are our predictions for the race?
Dude, who knows? Anytime you go to Daytona, whether it's for that or for the Coke Zero, you're basically looking at a whole lot of star power, right? So you got all the celebrities coming out. You got so many people that are excited by the mystique of Daytona. And by the way, it is gorgeous down there. I mean, it is absolutely worth the trip for anybody, for any sports fan who wants to see a spectacle. Go to a race at Daytona. Doesn't matter which of the two races. I'm sure the 500's better, but I haven't been yet. I've only been to the Coke Zero. All I'm saying, though, is it's almost impossible to predict what you're getting at a track like Daytona. So I think what we're going to see is a whole lot of close racing. It's going to be interesting to see strategy from manufacturers. I honestly might change my answer and say the Chevys could stay together on Sunday, but who knows? I'm just looking forward to a good race here. In terms of predictions, I think it's really difficult. I think I might have taken Denny Hamlin as a winner, but who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong with the Toyotas. All those guys performed. They finished 1, 2, 3 last year with Hamlin at the top. I mean, the last time that a guy went back-to-back was Sterling Marlin in 94 and 95. I don't think Hamlin's going to do it, but I do think his teammate, Kyle Busch, is going to break through finally for his first Daytona 500 win. I mean, I also see the Penske cars up there. Hendrick, obviously strong. If they're able to work together and, find their way out of the big one, there's a good shot there. I mean, you look at guys like Michael McDowell. You look at guys down there. I mean, anybody has a shot. And, there really is no rhyme or reason to it because it is the Daytona 500 and anything can happen and it's so unpredictable. But I do think that Kyle Busch will break through and get his first 500 win this year.
Bach, I'm sending you a song after this, Rhymes and Reasons by John Denver. Continue, Cullen.
For all we know, David Reagan could take this one home for his second Daytona win. So
I'd be about it.
I would be about it too.
Sure.
I think that's definitely the fun of this race. But even judging from, practice times from the Clash, those Fords looked fast this year. And as we know in past experiences, they work well together. And we've got a guy fresh off of a formerly restrictor plate race from Talladega, Ryan Blaney. And I could see him going back to back. If he's got the help, if he's got Ryan Newman up there with him, if he's got his teammates up there with him, there are a lot of Fords and they're more than willing to help each other. So if there's a pack of 4 or 5 of them up there, seeing a guy bringing home with the Mustang on the front of the car is definitely not something I'm going to be surprised to see.
Again, one of those guys that I also see having another big year this year because him too in a contract year, only won 2 races with Penske, and you can argue that those wins, weren't necessarily earned because obviously you had the Charlotte Roval with Johnson and Truex wrecking, and then Talladega last year just inching out Ryan Newman. But a great super speedway racer, like you said, and I think that he'll have a big year this year. He has to perform if he wants to keep that 12th car.
All right, boys. So I got a little notebook with me, and it's now empty. Is there anything else we got to hit on before we strap in for the Daytona 500 this weekend?
Let's get to Daytona, boys. We've been waiting all off season for this. Let's get it going.
Yeah, I'm ready. Very excited for this year, guys.
So am I. An absolute pleasure. Episode 1 in the books. Stay tuned. We got next week Daytona 500 to talk about, which we can only assume is going to be a good story. So we'll be back at you. Adios, boys.
Take it easy, guys.
Got you on the flip.